Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name's Chelsea and I like to talk about horror movies and spooky stuff and true crime. And the majority of my videos, at least at the moment, are going to be covering true crime stories that actually inspired horror movies. So if you love that type of content as much as I do, I hope you stick around and give this video a like. Maybe check out my other videos and keep an eye out for future videos. Would love it if you subscribe and become a part of the family, our little spooky family here. So, without further ado, today we are going to be talking about the cult classic horror movie Jennifer's Body and the story that allegedly inspired it. So, let's go. So Jennifer's Body is a cult classic. It's one of my favorite movies. If you haven't seen it, stop right now and go watch it. It's on Max. It's actually categorized as a horror slash comedy, but there are a lot of people out there that are like, it's not that funny. I think it is. I actually get a kick out of some of Megan Fox's lines. I think it's one of my favorite ones is when she says they're like agents of Satan with really cool haircuts, except in the real story, they do not have really cool haircuts. We'll get to that in a second. So just a quick summary of the movie. It is a cult classic movie about a girl who is obsessed with this band that comes and plays the show. She tries to hang out with them. They end up taking her and sacrificing her to the devil. So that way their band can play better in hopes that they will, get famous. And so it's an emo band in the movie and just little details that I'm pointing out for now. So she and her friend go out to this small bar and they go see this band that she really likes. And while they're there, this big fire happens and then they manage escaping through the bathroom window. And then Jennifer wants to go check out the band's cool van, is what she says. They assume that she's a virgin, and then her friend actually tells them that they're a virgin before the fire happens. And so when she goes into this van, they end up deciding that she's the one that they're going to sacrifice to the devil to make their band famous. That way they can play better and land a record deal and all that stuff. And so it turns out she's not a virgin, and in the sacrifice it doesn't work, and she comes back as this demon who eats boys. So it's all that second part that really is the horror movie, made up part of it. But the entire idea of a band sacrificing a virgin to the devil in order to make their band famous comes from the case of Elise Poller. So the Elise Poller case that this movie was inspired by is actually very sad, gruesome, and trigger warning for a lot of things that I'm sure I won't even be able to say on here, and they will be edited, and I will try my best to kind of speak softly about this because it is a very, very sad case. Elise Poller was a 15-year-old girl, blonde hair, blue eyes, beautiful, living her best life. As she gets into her later teenage years, she starts going through a rebellion phase, and that's when she starts dabbling around in alcohol and substances. And her parents eventually get worried that she's taking this too far, and they send her to a rehabilitation center, and that's where she meets Jacob de Lachmat. Jacob de Lachmat is somebody who is kind of known as an outcast, and they do go to the same high school together, so she does see him in high school a few times. They've both been suspended prior to this, and that's how they end up making a deeper connection at this rehabilitation center. After they get out of rehab, Elise chooses to continue hanging out with Jacob and some of his friends. So Jacob and two other boys named Joseph Fioruella and Royce Casey are all part of a heavy metal band named Hatred. I'm sorry, I don't know why I think that's funny. What a name for a heavy metal band. Hatred. I can't even say it seriously. I like heavy metal, don't get me wrong. Because this band, Hatred, is actually inspired by the band Slayer, and they put on one hell of a show, let me tell you. If you like that type of music, go see Slayer. But back to the story. So they were inspired by the band Slayer. They're a heavy metal band, and they're really trying to make it. Joseph Fioruella, we're just going to call him Joe from now on, actually became a member of a satanic church, a satanic temple. And what's interesting about that is the way that he took this Allegedly, he was getting pamphlets and things from this, and he started getting the other two boys in the band really interested in satanic rituals and Satanism and all that stuff. So all the boys start hanging out a lot more with Elise, and they decide that they are going to sacrifice a virgin in order to make their band famous. They want to be able to play harder, faster, better, louder, all that stuff, in hopes that this will actually help make them more famous and land them a record deal. Joseph actually is the one that decides that Elise is going to be their perfect candidate for the sacrifice. She has blonde hair, blue eyes, she is a virgin, and they want to sacrifice her. I think it's interesting that they chose her, because while she might be a virgin in one aspect, she is certainly not pure with her alcohol and substance abuse past. Joe was the one that decided that they would go forward with a sacrifice, and they chose Elise to do so. One day, the boys, and there was one other boy that was a part of this, they had led Elise down a ravine to go hang out, or down to a ravine, and then a fourth boy ends up falling down the ravine. It says that he's hurt or something and that Elise needs to go help him. So Elise goes down to help him, and then one of the other boys throws the pretending to be hurt boy a knife, and they're telling him to do it, do it, do it. And he ends up basically chickening out and not killing her because he has a conscience and he decides that he doesn't want to be a part of this. So that boy was not involved in the actual murder, and after this instance, Elise just thought that they were kind of messing with her, and so she didn't take it seriously. And there are versions of this story that I've heard that in one version, her mom comes down and sees it happening, and then she kind of brushes it off with her mom, says, oh no, they were just messing with me. But in other versions, the mom isn't there at all, so I'm not really sure which one is true. But regardless, this first instance happens where she is supposed to be sacrificed, and then it doesn't happen. So she continues to hang out with these boys because she thinks that, again, that was a joke. So on July 22nd of 1995, Elise tells her parents goodnight and she goes to her room. When she gets to her room, she puts pillows underneath the blankets and makes it look like she's still sleeping, and then she sneaks out her window to go plan in some illegal fun activities with these boys, with the band Hatred, if you will. She sneaks out and they end up going to a eucalyptus field, and they start getting into their devil's lettuce appreciation time, I guess we'll call it. And so after that happens for a little while, Elise starts to get comfortable, and that's when Joe decides to take off his belt and begins to strangle her. Then he takes a hunting knife and he begins stabbing her in the neck. And after a few stabs, he passes the knife to each of the boys, and they all get a turn stabbing her. And an autopsy report shows that she was stabbed 12 times, and she did not die from these wounds. She was then, after stabbed, the boys kicked her in the neck because they wanted to make sure she was dead. And again, this also did not kill her. This poor girl bled out, calling for her mom and praying to God. And this is just like so beyond heartbreaking that anybody could do this. Mind you, these boys are 14, 15, and 16. They're nothing but children, and they're sacrificing another child to the devil. Where were their parents? Like, what is going on? So she's left there, and then allegedly, after she had passed, the boys would come back for weeks and they would violate her dead body, which is very sad. So, and not just sad, but disgusting. Like, again, who are these boys' parents and how did this become their life? Eventually, Royce Casey has a come to Jesus moment, and he decides that he is no longer a satanic follower, and he becomes a Christian and develops a conscience. And about 9 months later, he comes forward to the cops because not only does he think that Elise will not be the only sacrifice by these other boys, but because he's chosen to separate himself over time from them, he is scared for his own life as well. So he comes forward and tells the cops everything, literally everything, and that's how we know all the information that I've been able to tell you today. So when Royce comes forward, all three boys end up ultimately getting a 25 to life sentence. So after the boys were all found out to be a member of the band Hatred that was inspired by Slayer, the family had a lawsuit against the band Slayer, and that one ultimately got thrown out because they were protected under freedom of speech. And then when that didn't work, they did try to go to the record company, and that lawsuit got thrown out as well. And I totally understand this because the family is hurting so much when this happened that they are trying to do anything to make it, nothing's going to make it better, but to have some sort of justice, because the boys are children, and how did they fall under the influence of something like that brought them down this path? Today, Royce Casey, and it is September of 2023 at the time of recording this video, so in case somebody's watching this way later, I know a lot of other cases don't have this update, but Royce Casey has now officially been granted parole. And the family says that he is a rehabilitated man, and the family is okay with his release. They are, however, not okay with the possible release of the other two. So Joseph Fiorella did get denied parole, and Jacob DeLachette has a hearing for his parole in December of 2024. So he still has a while to go for the possibility of parole. And I'm hoping that Joseph, because it was his idea in the first place, that he never actually gets that possibility. Back to Royce Casey, since he is going to be released on parole, and he was granted that, he has been getting his psychology degree. He hopes to actually use that degree to help people that are dealing with substance abuse, which I think is really great. And it does kind of show that, I mean, he was a child when this happened, and I do have a little bit of like empathy for him, and I think it is possible for people to change, and I do want people to understand that. It is very heartbreaking what happened to Elise, but her family does accept Royce's release on parole, and so I think we should respect that. One thing I do, however, not agree with is that this family didn't get any restitution that they were promised from the state of California. And I don't really know how restitution works, but from my research as of today, they still have not received a dime. And again, they are still hoping that the other two boys never get released, but they have accepted Royce's release. So the family ended up setting up a foundation afterwards called the Elise Marie Poller Foundation, and it used to be elisemarie.org, but it no longer exists, sadly, and I'm not really sure why, and I can't figure out if they've maybe merged with another foundation or if they've chosen to cease operation. Those are the latest updates in this case that I have been able to find. Hope you guys liked learning about this story and understanding that Jennifer's body was actually inspired by a real live, disgusting murder case. I can't wait to share more horror movies and true crime cases with you, so if you guys like what I'm doing here, please join me again next week. I am hoping to be on a good weekly posting schedule, and I will see you guys on the next video. Thank you so much. Stay spooky.